Harmony. If you're stuck trying to learn thousands of chords out of one of those chord books, which by the way is harder to do than learning Japanese, explain why in this video, or you're wondering just how to write something for that awesome melody that you put together in your head, you should stick around and watch this video. Because harmony is the thing that allows musicians to break free of that damn chord book and actually understand what a major chord and a minor chord is, on top of all the other crazy chords. By the end of this video, you'll have everything that you need to be able to create any chord that you want, be it major, minor, 7, sharp 9. Pair the chords that will always sound good with whatever melody you write. And of course, throw the friggin' chord book in the trash. In case you don't know already, I have a great disdain for those things. Anyway, so whether you know nothing about harmony or just want to spice up your chord progressions, this video will show you how to do that by introducing to you the building blocks of harmony. And to prove to you how powerful this is, I'm going to take a melody that I wrote and put different harmonies behind it and make it sound happy, sad, totally different without rewriting the melody itself. So first, what's harmony? Harmony is just notes played simultaneously. And if you remember in a previous lesson, we talked about melody, where melody is notes played in succession. So if this is melody, this is harmony, notes played at the same time. So let's actually dive into this. But before we do, keep in mind this is part of a bigger free music theory course called Game Orchestration for Noobs. If you haven't signed up yet, there's a link in the description which will take you to all the free course material. That way you can follow along with this YouTube course while actually writing your own song, even if you have no previous music experience. Okay, let's get started. So first things first, how do we figure out what chords are going to go good with a melody that we've written? We're going to hop over into Reaper for an example. All right, we're in Reaper. Here's the melody that I wrote. The first thing we need to do is find the key. After we figure out what key it's in, we can determine the scale and then build chords from that scale. So first, let's write out everything that I have. So I'm going to highlight. Wherever there's a note, I'm just going to add a note to the beginning here to help me keep track. So I don't have a full scale here. So this is where I'm going to kind of have to use my intuition in my ear to figure out what this is and play with some of the notes in between. Now I know that this is probably going to be a diatonic scale. Again, a diatonic scale is a 7-note scale that uses whole steps and half steps. So by putting a note here or a note here, we have too much space. So this is probably going to be the second. And I have another E flat up here to represent the octave, since E flat is the tonic. So this leaves us with a couple options, but this is probably going to be E flat Ionian, since that's usually what most scales are written in, and I can go from there. So now that I have my scale, how do I figure out what chords are going to fit within this scale? It's actually pretty easy to do, and there's a simple trick to this. And then after we do that trick, we can figure out the names of each of these chords. So what we do is we take every other note for 3 notes, and that's one of our chords. Awesome. Now we do that from the second. In this case, we start from F, and we choose every other note. Awesome. And we just keep going up and doing that. So from the third, and the fourth. I'll skip ahead. You get the idea now. All right, I have all the chords that belong in my melody. Let's give them a listen. Perfect. Now you may have noticed that some of these notes started a little bit lower. Remember, these chord sequences, or these scale sequences, just repeat. So I just ended up taking the higher octave and lowering it. That's all. All right, so now let's figure out the names of these chords. Let's go to the whiteboard. All right, cool. So here is our E flat major scale. At the top, I have the chromatic scale, and then at the bottom in blue is our E flat Ionian scale. And so what we did is we took every other note, E flat, G, B flat. Then we did F, A flat, C. Then we did G, B flat, D, so on and so forth. So now I've written out all of our diatonic triads. A triad is just a 3-note chord, but now we have to figure out the names of these chords. Quick hint, this follows the exact same structure as when we did scales. If you haven't watched that video, go ahead and check it out. So in our first chord, E flat, G, B flat, we have to make our way from E flat to G. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 half steps. And then to go from E flat to B flat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 half steps. Well, if you remember, what's the specific interval name for 4 half steps? A major third. And 7 half steps is a perfect fifth. A chord structure that includes a root note, in this case E flat, a major third from the root note, and a perfect fifth from the root note is called a major chord. So this first chord here is E flat major. And this is how chords are named, via their tonic, in this case E flat, and the intervallic structure around it, in this case a major intervallic structure, is a major third and a perfect fifth. That's it. And I'm actually going to write them up here. Awesome. Let's move on to the next one. So we have F, A flat, and C. F to A flat is 3 half steps. F to C is 7 half steps. Now, if you remember, 3 half steps is 1 half step below a major third. And if we take a major and we lower it 1, it makes it minor. So in this case, we would have a minor third. And then, of course, you have a perfect fifth, which means that this is an F minor chord, with F being the tonic and the intervallic structure being minor. So I'll write it real quick. Now for the rest of these chords, I want you to try to guess what they are. Go ahead and pause, and we'll come back to it. All right, you ready? We have G minor, A flat major, B flat major, C minor, and then this last one might be a little bit tricky, D diminished. I'll go ahead and write that up. You see, diminished is a minor third and a diminished fifth. That's why it's called diminished. Now stay with me because I'm about to blow your mind. Now you may have seen in the past that the scale degrees representing these chords are written in Roman numerals, but some are uppercase and some are lowercase, and some have weird symbols next to them. We're about to do that right now. So majors are uppercase and minors are lowercase, and diminished are lowercase with a little circle next to it. So let's go ahead and do this right now. Capital 1, lowercase 2, lowercase 3, capital 4, capital 5, lowercase 6, and then a lowercase 7 with a little circle next to it. That circle generally means diminished. Now here's the part that will blow your mind. If you watched the video on modes, you'll remember that we have 3 major modes, 3 minor modes, and a diminished mode. You may notice that the major modes were your first, your fourth, and your fifth modes in the Ionian scale. Your 1, your 4, and your 5 are major chords. Likewise, the minor modes were your 2, your 3, and your 6. 2, 3, and 6 are minor chords. And then your 7th, the Locrian, was the diminished mode. It's also the diminished chord in this diatonic scale. Pretty wild, right? But here's the thing. We can go even further with these scales. In fact, we're gonna learn about 7th chords now. We're going to add another note to these. Jeez. So when we made E flat major, we started with E flat, skipped F, got G, skipped A flat, and then got B flat. Boom. Well, we can continue and skip now to D. So what does that create? If we go back up to the chromatic scale and count from E flat to D, we get 11 half steps. And 11 half steps is a major 7th. This chord now becomes E flat major 7. I'll write it up here. FAC, after that, we go back to E flat. E flat from F is 10 half steps away. And 10 half steps is 1 under that major 7th, so it's a minor 7. So this becomes F minor 7. G likewise is also a minor 7. A flat is a major 7. B flat's interesting because what we find is we have a major triad with a minor 7th on top of it. This is what we call a dominant chord. Now usually dominants are just marked by a 7 because they're that common. C is a minor 7. Finally, this diminished chord is really weird. It's called a half diminished chord. Basically, a half diminished is a diminished triad, but the 7th on that is a minor 7th away from the root. And a half diminished looks like a circle with a dash through it. And so here's what these look like. So I wrote them in red next to the original scale degrees. Now let's see how these sound. We're gonna go back in Reaper and we're gonna copy this over. And all we're gonna do is we're just gonna add the next note that skipped. All right, let's hear them. Kind Kind of crazy sounding, right? So let's put them back to back. We have our triads here and our seventh chords here. Triads. Sevenths. Now, as promised, I'm going to take that original melody and put different chords underneath it to make it sound happy or sad or whatever. So now let's experiment with that. We're back in Reaper, and here is a little melody. All right, so I moved my harmonies down, and I'm going to kind of play with these chords and make it sound kind of neat. I'm going to start with a 1 here, because I like that, and I want to make this version happy. So let's actually move these over. And I'm going to have a happy version here. And so I'm actually moving the root higher up so it has a smoother transition across, right? Instead of it being like from down here to up here, it just goes straight across. This is called voice leading. And when we do this to a chord, it's called inverting the chord. So this is now an inversion. So instead of the root being the bottom note, the bass note, the third is the bass note. And so this is called a first inversion. If I were to take the third and move that up an octave where the fifth is the bottom note, this is called a second inversion. It's still the same chord, it just has a different quality. All right, so I like this. So I'm like a doom, doom, boom. I kind of want this chord to come in a little bit later. Doom, doom, dun, 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 dun. You know what? I'm going to keep this fifth in here. I'm actually going to use the seventh chord to really, you know, give it this cool little tension before I resolve it back to a 1. Let's see how this sounds now. Now this is a little bit muddy, the seventh, so I'm actually now going to take away a chord. Now because I took away this note, this is no longer technically a G dominant 7 chord. It's a C diminished chord. And so this is a substitution to where I'm using a chord that infers a different flavor of another chord. And the reason I'm doing that is because the tone from that last chord had too many notes in it, sounded really muddy. But I can still get that seventh feel by, you know, removing one of those notes. So let's try this again. And I'm actually going to move this up. There we go. Sounds better. Now we're going to do one that's a little bit minor. I'm going to invert these to give them a little more breathing room. I'm just switching the octaves on these. And I'm going to do a little thing here to where I'm going to break the pattern a little bit because I feel like that would sound cool. All right. So again, like I'm taking these chord structures and just messing around with them. You're totally allowed to do that. That sounded pretty sweet. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these happy and sad versions next to each other and make a little tune. So I'm going to do 2 happy, 2 sad, but the melody stays the same. All right, so what I did is I put 2 happy versions and 2 sad versions next to each other. So we're going to make a little song out of these, and you're going to hear like the difference in how the song actually evolves using harmony. Again, the melody is totally the same up top, but you can see the chords I use are different. Let's give it a listen. Happy's first, sad is second. Wow, all of a sudden we're starting to see how harmony totally changes the feel of the melodies and even the songs that we write. So now it's time for your homework. I want you to take 3 of the melodies that you wrote and find the key, which you may have already done in a previous lesson, and then build out the diatonic triads and the seventh chords in the scale that your melody belongs. From there, I want you to write two versions, a happy and a sad harmony, to put your melody on top of. Feel free to experiment with it, and remember, keep those modes in mind from the previous lesson to give you an idea of what's going to be happy and what's going to be sad. And when you're done with that, we're going to move on to the next lesson. See you there.